Wrap up. Things you didn't see. When I meet people for the first time, whether it be on social media or in person, I often get a reaction of amazement. Wow, how do you know all this stuff? How do you put all this technology together so well? And I smile and nod and just say, well, you would be amazing too if you had an edit button. And it's true. This Exchange Migration series is about an hour or two of content, but that hour or two of content took me about 60 to 70 hours to produce. Not so amazing now, right? You might wonder, well, why don't you include the 60 or 70 hours? I would say, well, think about it. Most of that time is me going, why aren't you working? Come on! In many different ways. Now, because this is an IT expertise, which is a very real world series, many of those experiences and situations were included in the series itself. However, there were some that I said, let's move those to the end in this nugget, simply because either A, it was just a dumb move on my part, or B, it was a situation that was pretty specific to my environment here. But that being said, I still wanted a place for those situations because I know people will make the same dumb mistake that I do, and I know some people may have an environment similar to mine. So I thought I'd include them here at the end, just so you can gain that same experience without going through all the pain. So the first situation to learn from. I struggled probably more than any other situation in this series with the resource and account domain authentication through the migration. Here's what I mean by that. This whole migration situation started with me having one gigantic domain, some 4,500 accounts sitting in that domain that had just grown too big and unruly over the years. So what I was planning to do was take that and actually break it into many different subdomains for different customers and different divisions of the organization in this brand spanking new realm called ad.thevia.com. As a matter of fact, the entire first module of the Office 365 migration was just based around this. And it went so well. Until I got to this module, which was the Exchange migration, and I thought, oh, I wasn't planning to set up Exchange over here. As a matter of fact, I don't want to set up Exchange over here at all. So now how do I do this? How do I federate with Office 365 when I have two different domains? So let's just chalk up 5 hours of research right there, trying to figure out that puzzle. And that's when I realized this is a supported model, which is what you saw in this series. What you didn't see was the massive struggle I went through in having customer domains with the same UPN suffix as the UPN suffixes that existed down here. Specifically, I had thevia.com, which is used as a UPN suffix in both domains. Now here's the problem that I had. The users in this domain, let's just pick me, Jeremy, at thevia.com, were converted into linked accounts, meaning the accounts were disabled here and then linked to the real account in this domain. And here's what you didn't see. I struggled for probably 10 hours, maybe more, simply sitting on a computer connected to the internet and trying to get the account to authenticate as a linked account. I had assumed that when I converted this to a linked mailbox, the domain controllers here would be smart enough to say, oh, it's a linked mailbox, so just go ahead and authenticate it right here. But they weren't. Probably 5 of those hours was sitting on with Microsoft support, who determined that we had to remove the UPN suffix from this domain completely before the authentication request would forward down to this domain. Now that was a creepy moment because I still had a lot of active accounts down here. And I asked Microsoft support, I said, if I remove this, do those accounts immediately stop working because they're assigned to thevia.com? And their answer was, I don't know. Let's try it. So we waited till midnight, tried it, and sure enough, they did still continue to work. So let's just say an account down here, let's just say Sue at thevia.com, still worked even though we removed that UPN suffix from the domain. Once that happened, the authentication requests did pass through, the linked account started working, and thus the federation could move forward. The second thing that you didn't see was a dumb move on my part. Don't use a production account to test the mail migration. You saw me using an account called Ironman, which we created just to test it, threw a few emails in, and then migrated the account over. The truth be told, I migrated my own account, Jeremy at thevia.com, before I tried Ironman. Chalk up another 10 hours of pain right there. First off, my account is 15 gigs in size. So it took literally all day for that to migrate. Once it got there, everything blew up. People were getting undeliverable messages going to me. My account disappeared from the global address list. Secondary addresses were dropped from it. It was a mess. So then I had to take that account and move it back. There's another 12-hour migration before my mailbox was restored in the on-premise cluster. Lesson of the day, use Iron Man. Test and fix all the issues with that account before you actually get so excited that you migrate your own account over and blow everything up. The third thing that you didn't see fully was the repair of the Hybrid Exchange Mailflow connectors. There's a point in one of the nuggets where I discovered the expired SSL certificates, and it just does a quick cutscene. Poof, I say, and all of the certificates are repaired. Truth be told, there was tons of time spent with me actually acquiring that certificate, reassigning the certificate, and when I did reassign the certificate, it actually broke the Edge Transport subscription, meaning I have my Edge Transport server connected to all my internal Exchange servers. It's the one that receives the mail from the outside world. Well, when I went to repair the SSL certificates, which I found were expired on that guy, it actually broke the subscription to the internal servers. Dumb move on my part. I did it first thing in the morning. Sure, it was at 6 a.m. before most people got in, but when that thing broke, I broke into a cold sweat because I immediately started seeing hundreds of emails queuing up on that server waiting to be delivered. I had to install the new certificates, reform that relationship with the internal servers, all before these emails started getting kicked back as undeliverable. You didn't see that. It was scary. Don't make that mistake. The last thing that you didn't see was inconsistent email. Once I bridged together the Office 365 world and the on-premise Exchange cluster, I actually moved Iron Man over to this Exchange Online realm and started sending emails from my internal accounts out to that and back. Well, what I saw was that sometimes the emails would show up on Iron Man's account and sometimes they would get rejected. That was a puzzle that took some time. What I found out was there was a very old Exchange server that we had all forgotten about. You saw in all the diagrams Exchange servers named EX01, EX03, and so on and so forth. Well, also in the cluster was our very first Exchange server, FS02. It was originally a file server that we said, hey, let's install Exchange there. That was probably some years ago when I first got into Exchange hosting. The problem is nobody had ever removed that Exchange server from the cluster. When I ran the Hybrid Exchange Wizard, it identified that server as a valid hub transport server and tried to create the connectors to Office 365 there in such a way that it looked valid. Email would go to that guy in its load balanced way, but any email that ended up there would die simply because that email server was virtually dead. So behind the scenes in the evening, I actually completely decommissioned that server and removed it from the cluster. Then I got consistent email delivery over to Iron Man. That was the scene behind the scenes. I share that again for two reasons. One, I don't want you going through this module and thinking, man, it only took him an hour of time to do it. It takes time to do an Exchange migration well. Two, I wanted you to learn from my mistakes. And three, if you did have anything similar to what I had, I'd want you to at least plant the seed of some of the things I encountered behind the scenes, in the hopes that it will save you valuable time when you do your own migration. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.